Hey everyone, it's Allie, and I'm very excited to talk to you about a strategy that I think the community as a whole has all agreed is complete garbage. Today, we're going to be talking about Ritual. With 3.25, Ritual has gained some massive buffs, with them adding corpses, omens, and the Taken King as a whole with the boss invitation into Ritual itself, which has completely fixed all the issues with it and honestly has made it into an amazing strategy. I've been doing the strategy for 2 days now, and I am blown away how they have completely fixed every issue with it, turning it from a strategy that basically relied on you hitting a big jackpot to really make any money into a strategy that now is consistently making you about 10 div an hour with no big jackpots, which is great because I think Ritual's been a strategy that a lot of people have been wanting to do and have wanted it to succeed and be a good strategy, but unfortunately since the removal of Terror 8 seasons ago, Ritual has just kind of been in a dead state ever since. Well, with all these buffs in 3.25, Ritual is more than back, and I'm very excited to show you just how you can go about making quite a lot of money with Ritual very easily. Before we do go any further, I do want to say that you're going to need a somewhat tanky character to be able to do the strategy. Your clear is not going to matter too much in terms of both your mobility and your ability to hit the whole screen, but because we're going to be doing maps that have the equivalent of 1 Delirium Orb applied on them at all times, along with us having Beyond on every single one of these maps, it might get a little bit difficult at times. So if you can handle some somewhat difficult content such as Maven invitations or 8 mod maps, you shouldn't have any issues here. Any build around 20 to 30 divs should be more than enough to have no problems. And if you're playing something like Zenith or Archmage or Caspin Stun or RF or some other build that likes to stand still and just be a turret, you'll have no problem with the strategy. So with that out of the way, why don't we first start talking about the tree? The tree for this is going to be very simple. We simply just want to get every single ritual node on the tree, along with as much map modifier effect as we can, and any sort of other things that might help us with either juicing the ritual to give us more tribute, or just making the map faster. To add on to this, we are then going to also be picking up all of the Beyond nodes, along with Endless Tide, so we never get a boss, and we get as many Beyond monsters as possible, along with a 100% chance to get Delirium Mirrors in our map, and then we are going to be taking Unending Nightmares so they never go away. The reason we're adding both Beyond and Delirium into the strategy is because we want as many monsters to spawn during the ritual as possible. Any sort of Beyond or Delirium monster that ends up spawning during the ritual itself, which means we're gonna have a lot more tribute to work with in the shop, as we want to be able to get to the final shop with at least 6,000 tribute remaining at all times, as that will guarantee that if we ever see a big ticket item, we will have enough tribute to be able to defer it. And to finally finish off our tree, like I said, we're going to just be picking up all the map modifier effects that we can. We're going to get mounting modifiers, and we're going to also be getting Chisel Perfection, along with both slants for as much map modifier effect as possible, and we're going to be taking Invasive Adversaries just for a few additional monsters. The final thing that we're going to do in this tree is take Shrines. Now, if you don't personally like Shrines, you don't have to take Shrines. You can simply replace both Supplication, Drawn to Power, and Synchronism with just picking up more Scarab nodes, as we are right next to Skittering Swarms, and we're right next to Remarkable Relics, and you can potentially even pick up something like Harrowing Carapaces or Trapping Carapaces. So the final few points are completely up to you in terms of what you want to do with the strategy. Personally, I found that no matter what, picking up amplified artifacts actually feels really nice in a strategy, as you get yourself quite a decent amount of additional modifiers. And then finally, we're going to be taking red altars simply because they are currently worth the most amount of money, and we don't really care about getting additional quantity from blue altars, as it's not going to really affect the amount of tribute that we get in our maps. Let's move on to the map setup itself. For this strategy, you can honestly do a pretty wide plethora of maps. Personally, I did all this on City Square, as I liked the idea of being able to immediately rush the boss, kill it so we don't get any sort of boss altars, and at the same time, if we ever got a ritual that spawned on top of the boss, which happens in your map maybe around 10 to 15% of the time, we will immediately have all 3 bosses as part of the ritual for the remaining rituals throughout the map, giving us substantially more favor than before. You can also do this on something like Strand or Toxic Sewer, and people in my chat who were doing the strategy along with me said they were having some pretty decent results on those maps as well. So it's really up to you on just picking whatever map you prefer. I would highly recommend to not pick something like Jungle Valley or Mausoleum for this, as those maps can still spawn the ritual at the boss, even though the boss doesn't technically exist, meaning you would have to deal with the super slow bosses, which I would not recommend. In terms of how we're going to set up the map itself, once you do choose what map you want to do, you simply just want to chisel and alkit, and then simply just Regex I, which will be linked in the description below if you want to make a Regex Spirit build for any sort of bad mods that you can't do with your build. There was no specific quantity that I went for in these maps or any sort of specific pack size. I simply just chisel out and just send it. For our Scarabs for the strategy, they're going to be very simplistic. We are simply going to want to run 2 Scarabs of Selectiveness, which are going to give us 4 additional free rerolls in our rituals, along with 2 additional total rerolls, which means in total we'll be able to roll each shop 6 times, giving us effectively 6 rituals worth of loot at once. And we're then going to want to accompany this with 2 ritual Scarabs of Abundance. These Scarabs are going to give you 100% increased favor, which effectively just means 100% increased loot. With 2 of these, you then get yourself effectively 3 rituals worth of loot per shop window, meaning when we combine this with the 6 rerolls that we get from selectiveness, we're effectively gaining 18 full ritual windows worth of loot per map that we do. One thing that some people have tried in a strategy and has seemed pretty decent as well was to potentially drop 1 abundance and instead run an influencing Scarab with the hordes as a replacement for it, which would give you substantially more Exarch or Eater monsters, which actually pays for itself very well considering how cheap the Scarab is right now. You can play around with this as much as you want, but all the loot for this video will be based around you running double abundance. Finally, for the 5th Scarab, we're going to be running a Beyond Scarab with the Invasion. This Scarab is just downright broken. It's going to make it so every single rare that you kill within your map is going to generate 8 to 12 additional Beyond portals. This works for every single rare, including all the rares that we add into our rituals. It's going to work for daily monsters and it's going to work for normal monsters, meaning that this basically will just double the amount of total Beyond demons that you kill per map that you do. This can get a little bit rippy as you can potentially just be randomly swarmed by 20-30 monsters around you at once. Given how cheap the Scarab is right now and given just how powerful it is at generating us substantially more monsters in ritual, there is no way for us to not take this in every single map that we do. Finally, for the map device, we just simply pick the influence type that we're running, and we are then going to be selecting domination just to get more shrines to be able to go around the map faster. The nice thing about these shrines as well is that they have a decent chance of spawning inside a ritual circle. If they do that, all the monsters that spawn around the shrine will be added into the ritual pool as well, giving you even more monsters to kill for tribute. In terms of the map itself, running it is very simplistic. In my case, since I did this on City Square, I simply just rushed the boss, killed the boss. If there happened to be a ritual on top of it, I did the ritual, and then I simply just proceeded to clear the map from there as normal, picking up any sort of loot and clicking on any altars I saw along the way. If you do this in something like Strand, for example, obviously you won't be able to immediately run to the boss, so simply just clear the map as normal. Make sure you do all the rituals along the way, and then at the end, we're going to be doing some shopping. This shopping is going to be where the majority of the loot in this strategy comes from. You're going to get decent amounts from all the monsters that you're going to kill along the way, but the ritual shop is where all the big money is. You're ideally going to want to ignore the ritual until you've completed all of them, as the ritual is going to slowly unveil itself as you complete all of them, and you're not going to want to spend anything until you have all of your favorites to know how much you have to work with. The major thing to keep in mind at the shop is that we need to get to the final shop window with at least 6,000 favor on us. 5,000 favor could be fine as well, but you're kind of playing with fire, as if you do end up getting something very expensive that you need to defer, that might not be enough to be able to afford it. The reason for this being is we could potentially get something like a Mage Blood or a Mirror or a Head Inner or something high value that's going to cost 20, 30,000 tributes to flat out buy, which you're not going to be able to afford, and you're instead going to have to defer. That is why we specifically want to play on the safe side and always have 5,000 to 6,000 favor left over. So please do plan your shopping accordingly. The major thing that we need to talk about in the shop is going to be the defer button at the bottom. What this is going to allow you to do is it's going to allow you to pay 15% of an item's price upfront, and it's then going to save it for you for a few rituals without you losing it, allowing you to either purchase it later when you have enough tribute to buy it, or it allows you to constantly discount it, albeit you would be losing a little bit of favor in the long run. When you do defer an item, its favor cost is then going to be permanently reduced by 10%, meaning that you can eventually be able to afford something that might cost 5, 6, 7,000 favor without you pretty much flat out spending all of your favor on that one item. And outside that is going to be the main thing that we're going to be abusing to make sure that we actually have all the favor that we need on the final shop. Answered appeals is going to make it so whatever you defer is going to show up a lot sooner, meaning that you have a fairly high chance, especially for low value items, for them to just show up as you're rerolling your shop, meaning you can either keep deferring them to make them cheaper, or just basically almost guarantee that they're going to be on the final shop, so you just buy whatever you deferred in the previous windows. Our goal here is to basically do exactly that. We're going to be looking at the shop, we're going to be seeing if there's something that we would like to buy, and we're going to be deferring it to save it until the end. Because deferring is so much cheaper than flat out buying, it's going to be the main thing that's going to make sure we have at least 5,000 to 6,000 favor by the end. Once you look at everything in a shop window, you're then just going to simply click the reroll button. You're going to look at everything in that shop window and do the same thing again until you get all the way to the end. Your first 4 rerolls are going to be completely free, meaning that you don't have to worry about the cost of rerolling, but your 5th and your 6th reroll are going to cost you 1,500 or so favor per reroll, so do plan accordingly with that. In terms of the items that we're going to be actually looking for in these shops that we'd either want to flat out buy or defer, there's going to be quite a lot of varied items for us to look for. First off, we're going to have a lot of corpses, which if they are not perfect, they basically are immediately not worth anything. And the ones you're going to really want to be on the lookout for are going to be things such as perfect naval officers, perfect forest warriors, perfect turtles, and a few other various ones. This is going to be something that's going to take you a little bit to learn which ones are worth something and which ones aren't worth something. But if it does not have perfect at the beginning of it, the corpse is basically worth nothing. You're also going to be seeing yourself quite a lot of omens. The main one we want to be on the lookout for is going to be the omen of amelioration, as these are going to be somewhere around 40 chaos each, as a lot of people want them to be able to level a lot easier. And you're going to be seeing yourself a varied amount of either essences or scarabs or a bunch of raw currency. It's up to you if you feel like deferring it or not. For example, sometimes I will defer to chaos if there's nothing else good, and let's say I have 10-15,000 favor lying around because I got super lucky. But if it seems like I don't have much favor for that map and I need to penny pinch, I won't bother deferring any sort of random chaos I see, and I'll try to save it as much as I can. You're also going to be seeing yourself quite a lot of ritual splinters. These are fairly cheap, and if you have to make the choice between getting raw chaos or ritual splinters, the ritual splinters are actually worth a lot more money. 100 of these splinters combine together into an empty vessel, and these vessels currently sell for somewhere around 1 divine per 10 vessels. That on average means that 50 splinters is worth somewhere around 4 to 5 chaos, making it substantially better and cheaper than just buying 2 chaos outright. Finally, the last thing to be on the lookout for is going to specifically be all of these synthesized items. You're going to be seeing yourself quite a lot of fractured items, which you're going to have to hover over and see if they're good. And it's going to be something that you're going to have to learn over time in terms of, oh, is this fracture worth anything? Is this base good enough? And it's something that you can very easily price check to look through to see exactly what you might want and might not want to buy. You're going to also see a lot of synthesized items that have a synthesized implicit on them. There are quite a lot of different synth items that are worth something, but the main ones to be on the lookout for are going to be specifically rings, amulets, belts, and weapons. Pretty much every single chestplate, glove, and boot is just not going to be worth anything, along with shields and the majority of helmets. And all you're really looking for are rings with either +1 charge on them or % increased attributes, amulets with % attribute or any sort of attribute stacker stat on them, and then finally for weapons, anything with double damage or any sort of stat that might seem worth it, such as +1 frenzy or a very high crit multi chance. These are really easy to search for on PoE Trade with your Awakened Trade tool, so it's very easy to see if a base is immediately worth something. Finally, we also have big items such as mage bloods, henniners, mirrors, mirror shards, Kalandra rings, and any sort of other massive expensive item. Now, finally, there is one more thing that I need you to be aware of when doing these rituals. You have somewhere around a 1 to 30, 1 to 50, we don't know the exact ratio, but you have a small chance that when you do your rituals, all of your rituals will be Nameless King rituals instead. When you do end up getting lucky and getting yourself a Nameless King ritual, you will get an audience with the king available in every single shop when you reroll. This is very important to keep in the back of your head, and you will know that you got a Nameless King ritual because the ritual will have the name above it that says Nameless King on it. And when you actually start the ritual, if you have your audio turned on, you will hear the Nameless King laugh at you, and he will do a few voice lines when you begin each of the 4 rituals. What you need to do for these rituals specifically is to not buy the audience outright. These are going to be somewhat expensive, so you're only going to be able to buy one anyways, but what you want to do is you want to specifically defer it and then reroll. Every time you do this, a new audience will show up, meaning if you have the favor for it, which you most likely always do, you can immediately defer 6 of these, which are currently worth 0.8 div each. This means you just have a 1 in 30 to 1 in 50 chance that every ritual you do, you just hit a jackpot of somewhere around 5 instantaneous divines. Please keep this in mind, as you will see this quite often, and personally I saw this twice within the 60 maps that I did for my test. And as long as you do that, you can then go through and slowly buy the audiences that you deferred over the next few maps that you do to actually be able to cash in on the money that you made. With that said, let's actually discuss the loots that we got in the strategy. So I did 60 maps of the strategy to generate the loot for this video. What I want to mention very quickly about this loot is that all the maps I ran actually had a delirium orb applied onto them, because I initially set up 120 of these maps and we assumed that we were going to be using a delirium orb for all of them. About 5 to 10 maps into the strategy, we realized that this was bad to do, and it's just better to pick up delirium mirror with Unending Nightmare. So my loot is actually going to be a little bit worse than what you'd expect if you just ran Unending Nightmare, as I only had 1 Deli Orb on here in comparison to the multiple reward types that you're going to be getting from Unending Nightmare itself. With that said, as we can see, the loot is somewhat varied. You might be looking at this and you might say, Allie, that's going to be really annoying to sell, and honestly, it's really not that big of a deal. Pretty much 80 to 90% of all the loot that we got here is all just things that can just immediately be put up on the auction house. This includes things such as a bunch of scarabs, which you can either sell in the auction house or just bulk sell at once, cards, lots of different Eldritch currency and raw bubblegum currency, omens, and the only things that you're going to really have to manually sell are going to be any sort of fractured items that you get while doing the strategy, along with any corpses and maybe any sort of big ticket unique item that you might find along the way. It's really not that bad in my opinion, as the majority of the loot in this is just very easy to liquidate. If we want to look at Wealthy Exile very quickly, we can see that I made 38 div across 40 maps in raw loot. Now, this is just all the raw currency that we got along the way. We also need to add in all the fractured items that we did get from this as well. If we were to add all of the fractured items and all the bases, and if we were to also include all the corpses and any sort of other high value uniques that Wealthy Exile might not be counting, the total loot that we got from the strategy was actually somewhere around 63 div in total. Now, with that said, I did undervalue all of my fractured bases by quite a bit, and I typically value them at around 70 to 80% of the actual price that they were meant to sell for. For example, this wand here, which is meant to be somewhere around 3 div or so, I valued at around 2.5 div, meaning that we actually made a little bit more money, but I want to err on the side of caution that you might not be able to, for example, sell this base for the right amount of money, and you have to sell it for something like 2 div instead. So that said, at 63 div in total, that means we made a total of 1.05 div on average per map. If we want to look at our costs, we can see that we spent somewhere around 41 chaos per map. The calculations here were done for 120 maps, as I originally set up 120 total maps of this, but I only end up doing 60 instead of 120. But in total, our costs were 41.3 C per map. If we were to look at the 1.05 div I made on average, and we turn that over to chaos rate, which is currently 1 to about 175, we made 183 chaos per map, which if we then minus it by the 41 chaos that it cost us to do our map, we get 142 chaos profit per map that we did. On average, I was doing these maps at around 5 minutes per map. You might be able to do them a little bit faster, a little bit slower, but if we do want to average it at 5 minutes per map, that means in total, we were doing 12 maps per hour. At 12 maps per hour, in total, we made 1,700 chaos per hour that we're doing the strategy, or if we were to look at a div rate, we made 9.78 div per hour. Now, again, this was with me underpricing all of the fractured items that I end up getting while doing the strategy. And because of the volatile nature of fractured items, and given that there is a little bit of RNG when it comes to doing this in terms of what fractured items you actually see, your money per hour might go up or down by a div or so, but I would say I got some fairly average luck doing this. One other thing I want to mention on top of this is that your money per hour is actually even higher than advertised here. I do need you to take what I'm about to say with a massive grain of salt, but you can realistically, if you are going to be doing the strategy for an extended period of time, and by an extended period of time, I mean 50, 60 hours of nothing but the strategy, you can reasonably expect to add somewhere around 2 to 3 extra divines an hour into whatever your current hourly rate is. The reason for this being is all the big ticket items. Typically in the past, Ritual has been nothing but a go big or go home kind of strategy. If you didn't end up hitting something worth a few hundred div, you basically were sitting there making 3 to 4 div an hour at most. With the new strategy, we are now making up to 10 div an hour baseline, and that is not including any sort of big ticket item you might get on top of this. Ritual is very good for you to be able to hunt down your own mirror, mirror shard, headhunter, mage blood, or big synth base such as a +1 power charge ring. They are substantially more common than they are anywhere else in the game, but I still need you to understand that they are going to be rare. If you were to do this strategy for 50 to 60 hours, your chances of seeing at least one big item that's worth over a few hundred div fairly high, but not guaranteed. Some people might get super lucky and find a big item on their second or third ritual, and some people might not find one after doing 500 maps of the strategy. It is purely RNG, but given just how high the chances are of getting those items in this strategy in comparison to anything else in the game, we can reasonably add in 2 to 3 extra div if you want to. I'm not going to, and all of this is simply going to be advertised at 10 div an hour, but I do need you to keep in mind that that is a possibility. During the strategy, 5 hours in, I actually personally ended up getting a +1 endurance charge ring, which is worth 120 div. If I were to include this into my hourly rate for the amount of mapping I did for the strategy, I actually ended up making 33 div an hour doing the strategy. Again, your RNG will vary and you might get better results or worse results than me, but I do need you to keep in mind that this is a possibility and this strategy can simply just be better if you do get a little bit lucky. Don't count on it, and the nice thing is that we don't even have to, given how good the base hourly rate of the strategy is. And if you want to completely ignore that as a possibility, you're still making a solid 10 div an hour, which is just downright amazing. If you have any questions on strategy, feel free to leave a comment in the comments below, and I'd be more than happy to help you as soon as I can. I also stream on Twitch every single day, so feel free to come by Twitch and ask me any of your questions there. Or if you simply just want to come and join all the cuties and be a part of a community, I'd be more than happy to see you there as well. With all that said, I hope you cuties enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have fun with Ritual, and I hope to see you all in the next video.